We are going to start the fabric bucket. You are going to need to cut the pattern pieces in um, 6 pieces on your main fabric, in your lining fabric, and in your interfacing. And you want a fusible interfacing that you can fuse to the wrong side of each of your fabric bucket pieces. Now, if you would rather use interfacing, have kind of a floppy bucket, you can just do the interfacing on one side of the bucket, or you can do it on both and have a little bit more of a stiff bucket. I really like fusible interfacing. It allows me to um, be able to have my seam allowances already kind of cut out of the interfacing. If you use sewn interfacing, it doesn't work quite as well. Okay, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take 2 of my main fabric bucket pieces. I'm going to put them right sides together, and I'm going to stitch down the straight side, and then I'm going to stitch down the one of the diagonal sides. So you're going to see that right here. I'm stitching down the straight side, put my needle down here in the corner, turn, and keep going all the way to the point. And I'm just doing a chain stitch, which means I'm not taking my pieces off my machine. It just saves me a little bit of thread and time. So I'm going to do it again with the next 2 pieces. I'm going to put them together, right sides together. I'm going to stitch all the way down to that tip. Now you can see on my interfacing that I cut my interfacing out about a quarter of an inch or a half an inch smaller than my actual pattern pieces. That just helps so my seams are not as bulky. Um, so that's why I like fusible interfacing, because it takes some of that bulk out of those seams. If I'm using, if I have to sewn in interfacing, then it keeps the bulk in. So that's just a little tip. Um, I'm just going to trim these, and I have these 3 pieces now, so 6 pieces, each sewn 2 together. I'm going to open the first one. You can see it here. It already kind of has a little bit of that 3D dimension that I want. I'm going to take one of my other pieces and put them right sides together. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm sewing down that straight side and then across that diagonal, but I'm just sewing those 4 pieces together now. Does that make sense? So here I am at the corner, turn my needle, go right to my point here. So here's the point, and I'm going to back stitch right there and then clip my threads here. Okay, so now I have 4 pieces sewn together of my bucket. I'm going to take the other 2 pieces that are already sewn together, and I'm going to line them up just like I did those first few. Sew down that straight side again, and go all the way to the tip. Okay, now the tricky part. I'm going to continue sewing. So I'm going to put my needle down and lift my presser foot. And then I'm just going to put these pieces together and go up the diagonal of the remaining pieces. Put my needle down, turn, match, and then go up that straight piece. Do you kind of see how I did that there? So it's just one continual stitch. Now, if that scares you, you could definitely stop, just like we did on the original one, and sew it the same way. But this just kind of takes that additional step out. So I'm going to do the same step, but now I'm going to do it with my lining, and then we'll come back together. All right. I have my lining and my main fabric bucket together. What I'm doing right now is I put them together, right sides together, and I'm pinning the seams together so that the seams are matching for the bucket. So the main one is turned right side out. The lining is inside out. I've just put them together, just matching up the seams and just making sure that they are pinned together. And this is just going to make it so when you turn the bucket, those seams all line up and it keeps the right structure that you want and it looks really nice and clean. And you might need to use a lot of pins. It's kind of up to you. Now, I left a couple of pins to show where I want my opening. And that opening is important because that's how you're going to turn your bucket right side out. Okay, so I'm going to start at one of those pins that my opening is. I'm putting it in the arm of my machine, and you can kind of see I'm going to be stitching in a circle around the top of the bucket. I had some issues with my thread here. Fix it. There's always issues now and then, but that's not a problem. Okay, I'm going to put it back in my machine here. And again, I'm going to do a back stitch, so forward and back a couple stitches, and then I'm just stitching all the way around. I would suggest doing about a 1/2 inch for your seam allowance all the way around, especially because sometimes when you're lining up the bucket, when you're sewing all of those 6 panels together, they don't always match up perfectly, and that 1/2 inch gives you a little bit of leeway. So if your sewing isn't absolutely perfect, everything will kind of line up when you're done. And you can see I'm pushing the seams down as I go, so they're kind of laying flat. That's what you want. Okay, I got to my other pin for my opening. Just let me trim my threads. So you can see right there I have my opening. Here's my bucket. It's already standing on its own. Here's my opening. So I'm just going to take my material here and push it through that opening so that I can turn the entire bucket right side out. And this might take a little maneuvering depending on how big of an opening that you left. But here's my bucket, my lining and my bucket. So now I push the lining inside of my bucket and I'm just going to press that top seam all the way around. The top seam's the most important seam at this point because we want to close off the opening that we made. And on an iron, with an ironing board, this would be a little easier than on my tiny little ironing pad here, but it works. So we're just pressing that seam all the way around, getting it as flat as we can. I'm going to try my ham. That might work a little better. And then I'm going to press those side seams. And again, this would be easier just on a regular ironing board, but for demonstration purposes, we're going to try it this way. All right. It's all pressed. We're going to put it back on our sewing machine over the arm, stitching a top stitch all the way around the top edge of the bucket. This top stitch should be close to the edge, so like 1/8 of an inch in. It shouldn't really be noticeable. So if you have a really wide stitch, people will notice it. You're just doing this stitch to close off that opening and just to give the bucket just a little bit more structure. So clip those threads. Make sure everything's nice and pressed. And then your bucket is ready for all the fun treats, the fun decorations, whatever you want to use your buckets for.